Hi everybody, Roy here, and welcome again to another edition of the Right Has Left podcast, where we talk about the news from this past week and perhaps breaking news that'll happen on Monday. Many times on this podcast, I talk about things that the networks haven't even picked up on yet, and then they start discussing it on Monday, which is kind of cool. I do a lot of digging and do a lot of soul searching and commentary on things that have broken in news this past week and kind of give my opinions and title that, because so far we still have a First Amendment right and a somewhat of a free press to talk about things. So having said that, let's go ahead and get into it. And like I said, we've got a lot of stuff going on. And here's the first thing that we're going to talk about today, and that is Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. Yeah, he summoned the military's top officers and hundreds of generals and admirals to a base in Northern Virginia for a sudden meeting next week, according to three people familiar with the matter. The directive did not offer a reason for the gathering. That's going to happen on Tuesday, of senior commanders of one-star rank or higher, and of course their top advisors at the Marine Corps base in Virginia, Quantico. The people who described the move as very unusual were not authorized to publicly discuss the sensitive plans and spoke on condition of anonymity. You know, hey, don't mention our names. We'll tell you a little something that's going on. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth said that I am doing this and it needs to be done, and that's all we're going to say about it. The Pentagon's top spokesman, Sean Parnell, confirmed that the Hegseth will be addressing his senior military leaders early next week across the military. Now, there are over 800 generals and admirals of all ranks. Many command thousands of service members and are stationed across the world in more than a dozen countries and time zones. The meeting comes on the heels of several unusual and unexplained actions that Hegseth has taken involving military's leaders. Now, let's talk about this just a little bit. Many people have said there's somewhat of a security risk bringing all of these generals to one spot in the United States and, you know, leaving their posts where they're stationed. Others have said it's not a big deal because these generals, when they have to do certain military actions and procedures, they do it via secured video conferencing, and, you know, they're not boots on the ground, and so it's not a big deal. There is somewhat of a security risk bringing all of these people to one spot in the U.S. too. But again, the other folks said it's not a big deal, so don't worry about it. So I don't know. Now, as you know, Trump has renamed the Department of Defense the Department of War because it sounds macho and manly. Let's do that. You know, we're not defending the U.S. anymore. We're warmongers, and we're going to go after the people. You know, we changed that to the Department of Defense after World War II, but Trump thinks it sounds more manly. You know, and that's what this present administration is all about, is, you know, white privilege, manly stuff. So let's have Department of War. So anyway. Hegseth has ordered that the military cut 20% of its four-star general officers, directed an additional 10% cut from all general and flag officers across the force, and told the National Guard to shed 20% of its top positions. Although we want to use the National Guard to now march around here in the U.S. soil, so we can watch out that we, you know, take care of rioters and protesters and then round up all of those illegal immigrants at 3,000 count a day. So, you know, that's what he wants to do. In February, you know, Hegseth fired Lisa Franchetti, the Navy's top officer, and he fired General James Sliff, the Air Force's second highest officer, without explanation. He also relieved the military's top lawyers. Since then, Hegseth has fired other military leaders without saying why. Most recently, it was a general who led military intelligence agencies whose initial assessments of U.S. damage to Iranian nuclear sites and American strikes that angered President Trump. So he, you know, fired that person because they said there wasn't that much damage when Trump said it was totally annihilated. So there you go. You can see what's going on here with all of this. I don't think it's a meeting of a national urgency as far as something that's going to happen in the way of war. Is basically he wants to get all these people together and say, you either start doing stuff the way I say it's going to be done, or I'm going to get rid of you too. I think that's what's going on. He wants to rally the troops. Department of War, rah, 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 we're going to go out and take care of everybody and anything if you try to do anything against the U.S. instead of, hopefully that's what it is, or more people are probably going to get fired. This is a sad situation that we have come to here in the U.S., but it's basically that's what's going on. In other news, it's James Comey now this time around. So James Comey, who, as you know, was a former FBI director, has been indicted by a federal grand jury in an extraordinary escalation of President Donald Trump's effort to prosecute his political enemies. And this is all what it is. It's political. And I think Comey's going to have a very strong defense because there's been so much pre-trial publicity already about Donald Trump saying publicly, I don't like you, and if I don't like you, I'm going to get rid of you. If I can jail you, that's exactly what I'm going to do. So Comey, who was a long-time advisory adversary, I should say, not advisor, but he was an adversary of President Donald Trump, is now the first senior government official to face federal charges in one of Trump's largest grievances. The 2016 investigation into whether his first presidential campaign colluded with Russia. Justice in America is what President Donald Trump finally said, because he finally has, gotten able to prosecute Comey. He went on to say that Comey is one of the worst human beings in this country has ever been exposed. And the former corrupt head of the FBI, Trump wrote in Truth Social, Comey has been charged with giving false statements and obstruction of a congressional proceeding, and he could face up to 5 years in prison if convicted. Both charges are connected to his September 30th, 2020 testimony to the State Judiciary Committee. The indictment for lying to Congress is related to the FBI's Arctic Haze leak investigation related to classified information that ended up in 4 different newspaper articles. Appearing by Zoom, Comey testified that he had not authorized someone else to be an anonymous source in news reports, the indictment said. That statement was false. Comey responded to the indictment in an Instagram video saying, all right, let's just go ahead and have a trial and keep the faith. My heart is broken for the Department of Justice, but I have a great confidence in the federal judicial system. I'm innocent, he added. And, of course, Attorney Pam Bondi said in a post, no one is above the law. So, see, these things, which is, with Trump shooting his mouth off like he did about, I finally got Comey and my political adversaries, and Pam Bondi saying that, the defense can use these things to their advantage, because you don't say things like that when you indict somebody. You keep your mouth shut, and both the prosecution and the defense, starts doing their things. But when you start doing stuff like this, they can take all that stuff and present it to a jury and say, hey, look at this. This is a political prosecution. This isn't anything that Comey done wrong. These are just people. It's a political thing. And that technically is illegal. But, what are you going to do when you've got stuff like that going on? Now, Trump's former personal attorney and the new top prosecutor in the Eastern District, Virginia, she was the one that filed these charges. Again, all of the other people were saying, we're not going to bring charges against Comey. There's not enough there to do it. And so what Trump does, he orders Pam Bondi, well, then fire him. Find somebody else that will do it, So he goes after and finds this lady to go ahead and bring up a grand jury. Now, she was not accompanied by any career prosecutor. This lady has never even done this before. But, she bowed down to the pressure and said, okay, I'll do it. I want my name out there. I want to be somebody important too, just like you. So, and she's the only Justice Department official who signed the charging documents. During a brief hearing, a judge announced the new case against Comey and said publicly that 14 jurors agreed to indict on the counts of false statements in the jurisdiction of a congressional proceeding and obstruction of a congressional proceeding. They tried to go after 3 judges. They only got the 2. And again, we don't know who was on this grand jury, how they were picked so quickly and where they're from. They could have been pro-Trump people, and they went ahead and hurriedly did this. The reason they did this is the statute of limitations was going to run out on Tuesday on charging Comey with anything. So they had to either get this done in the next 48 to 36 hours or, whatever those, in between there to get this done before the statute of limitations ran out. That's why this was rushed through so quickly. Now, Halligan, who had never presented to a grand jury, did a crash course to prepare with the DOJ attorneys and FBI officials ahead of this happening on this indictment this past Thursday. And And she also participated in a number of practice runs, and then she also spent hours going through the material in preparation. So, this is really weird. Again, it's another political attempt by Trump to get rid of anybody and everything that ever said anything negative about him, or tried to, before he became president, he went through all those charges, and he's just trying to make a repetition of getting things done here. So it's extremely sad that it has come down to this, but here you go. And besides James Comey, Trump wants to go after this guy, billionaire George Soros. And he said that this guy should be in jail too, as he continued to threaten the 95-year-old philanthropist and Democratic mega donor. The president has basically and baselessly accused the Hungarian-born Holocaust survivor and founder of the nonprofit Open Society Foundation of funding protesters and demonstrations against his administration. We're going to look into Soros, Trump said, because I think it's a RICO case against him and other people. And he said that on Fox and Friends, his favorite station, because of how they like to present Trump in such a positive light all the time. And he demanded that Soros be prosecuted. Again, this is stuff that goes on. Now that the Republicans have control of the Senate, of the House, and basically the Supreme Court, they want to remain in power forever. As we become more and more of an authoritarian country, more of state-controlled press, and more that he has the power that the Supreme Court has given him, he's going to take advantage of it. And he is going to get rid of anybody, and he totally wants to eliminate the Democratic Party. He wants to get rid of anybody that's ever said negative of him, and make sure that anybody in the future will never say anything negative about him. He's the king. He's the guy that wants to be in charge. And once he's gone, it's probably the vice president's position to take over that as well, J.D. Vance, and set him up. And hopefully, this was always a country of where you were able to speak your peace of mind. You were able to have peaceful demonstrations. You were able to say, because of your right of freedom of speech, and that's slowly being taken away. And he slowly wants to get rid of the Democratic Party and jail everybody so he can, have everything his way. It's sad that it has come to this, but, that's basically where we are. And other news, which a lot of you have been following, and here it is. Trump signs order for TikTok sale and values it at $14 billion. Following reports that the Trump administration is seeking a multi-billion-dollar fee from investors in the TikTok deal, experts have called the payment as unprecedented shakedown scheme. What am I talking about here? Well, Trump is very proud, and he is taking full credit that he brokered the deal to get TikTok sold to U.S. investors. All right. And there's probably going to have to be a new app that's going to have to be downloaded once TikTok becomes, property of the United States. They made a deal where it's 80%, 20%. In other words, 80% of TikTok of the U.S. version will be held and controlled here, and then the other 20% will be still held by the Chinese company ByteDance. Well, because Trump feels that he brokered the deal, he's entitled to what we like to call as, basically a finder's fee. So with that finder's fee, he's talking billions of dollars. And some people say, well, that's kind of a shakedown. And where this money is going to go, we don't know. He says the government is entitled to it. Well, we don't know if the government is entitled to it or he personally is entitled to it. But anyway, they've approached the consortium of the U.S. investors, including Oracle and Silver Lake, who are going to be buying TikTok, about making the payment for brokering the sale of TikTok's U.S. operations from its Chinese parent company, ByteDance. Key details of the reported payment include the fee request, a person with direct knowledge of the talks, and said the Trump administration is asking investors to pay in the low billions with a B, ladies and gentlemen. Investors reported they agreed. Okay, yeah, this would be such a great deal. We're willing to pay that, or they kind of call it a finder's fee, or the cost of doing business with the current administration. Trump's response when asked about the fee, Trump was very evasive, stating, "We're going to be announcing different things, but the U.S. comes out great on this deal." Legal and business experts expressed concern, noting that there's no legal basis for the government to take a cut of a private company's sale. They argue it undermines the integrity of legal process and could be set a concerning precedent of a type of behavior pattern. The United States government acquiring an equity stake in Intel and demanding a cut of future chip sales to China from Nvidia and AMD as part of the pattern of confusing presidential power to extract value from private companies. This also has been going on. The United States government is supposed to be separate from any potential tax revenues that would result in a finalization of a sale. So, where am I going with all this? It is technically illegal and against the Constitution for the United States to be getting involved and accepting payment from anybody when you do something. Trump, of course, finds it totally different. He's a business guy and he's conducting business. The other question is where is this money going? If he gets this billions and billions of dollars, I can guarantee you it's probably not going to go in the U.S. Treasury. If it does, maybe a very small portion of it will. This guy knows how to manipulate things and, come out where he is personally or his family is going to profit from it. It's all very shady. Again, we don't have any proof other than this hearsay talk that this is actually happening. I don't put it past him, but again, you just don't do this. But here we are, and I say where the Democrats are the minority party, there's not a damn thing they can really do about it except piss and moan and groan like their Democrats like to do when something is not wrong, and especially with the new budget talks coming down, which I'll talk about here in a minute. But you can't do anything about it. So I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see what happens, because we are really stuck as far as all the stuff that this guy does. Now, moving on in other news, and this is kind of sad. An Immigration and Customs Enforcement officer has been relieved of current duties after widely shared videos that you've seen, which I'll have here in just a moment, on social media, showing him tackling a crying woman to the ground inside the halls of an immigration courthouse in downtown Manhattan. This all happened in front of her 2 young children. Watch this.
An Immigration and Customs Enforcement agent has been relieved of his current duties after shoving a woman to the ground during a confrontation at an immigration courthouse in New York, according to an ICE official. The incident happened after agents detained a man, reportedly her husband, at the ICE district office in Lower Manhattan. Agents separated the pair, who were clinging together with a girl, and took the woman into a nearby room. Later, she returned to the hallway, visibly upset, waving her hands toward an agent. That's when the agent forcibly pushed her up against a wall. The 2 then fell to the floor as the agent tried to force her down the hallway. Security officers then escorted the woman out of the courthouse. U.S. Representative Dan Goldman said on X the agent's actions were an egregious act of excessive force. He also called on DHS Secretary Kristi Noem to take disciplinary action against the agent. New York's comptroller, Brad Lander, said on X the woman had to be taken to the hospital. Lander said the multiple masked ICE agents did not identify themselves, did not present a warrant, and did not give any lawful grounds for detaining the man. Lander was previously arrested for trying to prevent ICE from arresting migrants and is a frequent critic of the agency. ICE Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaughlin said, "The officer's conduct in this video is unacceptable and beneath the men and women of ICE. Our ICE law enforcement are held to the highest professional standards, and this officer is being relieved of current duties as we conduct a full investigation."
Now, after the officers did pry the woman away from her husband, a young woman, she was yelling at the officers in Spanish that said they don't care about anything. The agent repeatedly told her adios before abruptly shoving her to the ground across the hall against a wall and then pushing her to the ground. Then she was pinned down by her back, as you just seen in the video. He then pushes her towards a uniformed officers and yells her to get out of the building. And this is not the first time ICE agents have thrown helpless women to the ground. Here's another instance. Watch this.
Oh my God. That was really cool, guys. You guys are super cool for that. How is she supposed to move? Let's go. That's good.
Now, Homeland Security Deputy Secretary Tricia McLaughlin, said in a statement to the Independent News Agency that the officers' conduct was unacceptable and beneath the men and women of ICE. And she stated that this particular person has been relieved of his current duties, whatever the hell that was. So, anyway, as you can see, the way ICE has been treating supposedly illegal immigrants, these people are coming to the court as they're supposed to do to renew their visas and things like that. And instead, you got these ICE agents getting information and huddling around these places and then taking these people down when they're just doing their thing to come to renew their card, and they're calling them, we're going to round you up and throw you in jail. This is all like 1939 Germany, don't you think? This is what it's coming down to. When you've got these guys and, they're not that well trained, anybody and anybody can now become an ICE agent because they need so many of them because they've been appropriated billions of dollars that, the big beautiful bill that took away from our healthcare system and anybody else to help seniors and other people, they've taken all that money and just dumped it into ICE. I mean, it's public record. You can see it right there. And they're trying to hire ICE agents all over the place because they want to get rid of anybody that's got brown skin. You cannot sit there and tell me that when you're rounding up 3,000 immigrants a day, that each and every one of them are bad criminals, as Trump says. They're terrible people. We've got to get rid of these thugs and these people that are here illegally. 3,000 of them a day, and each and every one of these people, hardworking, individual family members and women and children, they're all criminals. And they're, see, this is the thing. And then, of course, his MAGA base, they all believe that. Trump can open his mouth and say the sky is purple. And you're going to talk to Trumpsters and they're going to say, yeah, the sky's purple because our president says it's purple. It's sad. You cannot tell me that when you're rounding up 3,000 people a day, immigrants, that each and every one of them is criminal. They're here illegally. Maybe they are. They're trying to do the thing. They're trying to put food on the old families. They're not bothering anybody, but by God, we're going to get rid of them. So, and you're seeing stuff like this, the way they're treating these people. They're not getting any due process. They're not getting anything. They just throw them in the ground and get them out of there because these guys are white privileged, tough people, and they wear these masks, and it makes them bullies, and therefore, I'll do whatever the hell I want to do because I can do it. And it's sad that it has come down to this. It just breaks my heart. I can understand going after the real true criminals, and if that's fine. You should do that. I am a supporter of getting rid of people who are actual criminals that have done wrong, and they need to be rounded up. That's great, but they're not doing that. They're going after anybody and everything that they've done nothing wrong, and they're getting rid of them. And sad stuff. Let's move on. I've said my piece on that. In other news, doctors in the United States will soon be advised not to prescribe the pain reliever Tylenol. And why? Is because the great guy Kennedy and Donald Trump said that you shouldn't prescribe Tylenol to pregnant women in the United States. Donald Trump said, citing a disputed link between the drug and autism. That's what he's saying. He's saying that this is got something to do with autism, and it's because it's got something to do with autism, we better not be prescribing that. So he claimed on this past Monday that taking Tylenol is no good, and that pregnant women should fight like hell to only take it in cases of extreme fever. So said medical experts. We don't know who those medical experts are, but that's what he said. And of course, other medical experts worldwide, may I point out, have strongly pushed back on the claims, with some calling the president's comments very dangerous. Health officials, however, stress that Tylenol remains the safest painkiller available to pregnant women. Trump was basing his comments on several unproven testing against other tests by various organizations that came up, and all of them have said that it is inconclusive. In other words, there's no true basis of the fact that Tylenol is dangerous. There have been some studies. Now, I'm going to be transparent here. There has been some studies that have stated that there might be some connection between that and Tylenol, but it is inconclusive. In other words, maybe, but we haven't actually proven it yet. But the president likes to go on and say things like this because Kennedy said so. And we all know about Kennedy being a conspiracy theorist kind of guy. And so he he gets out there and says those things. And of course, Trump immediately goes on television because he likes to be in front of the media. And he couldn't even pronounce, half of the names of when he did the video. In fact, go ahead and watch this brief clip that I got about this.
First, effective immediately, the FDA will be notifying physicians that the use of let's see how we say that. Acetaminophen. Is that okay? Which is basically commonly known as Tylenol during pregnancy, can be associated with a very increased risk of autism. So taking Tylenol is not good. All right, I'll say it. It's not good.
So, again, Kennedy tries to say this is terrible stuff, and then Trump, he wants to talk about it too because he's the president and he's just reading whatever they hand him, and the poor guy, he's having a tough time with it. So he says Tylenol's a bad thing, and of course, when the president says it's a bad thing, we as all people in this wonderful country called the United States, we need to say, okay, it's a bad thing. You said it's a bad thing, so it's a bad thing. We're not going to make any critical thinking skills. Whatever you say, okay, thank you. And that's where we go. All right, moving on to other news. Yes, Jimmy Kimmel. He got his show back. Yay! So anyway, President Donald Trump this past Tuesday night slammed ABC for reinstating comedian Jimmy Kimmel after pulling the late night host off the air last week, and he suggested possibly taking action against the television network. I can't believe ABC fake news gave Jimmy Kimmel back his job, the White House said. ABC said that his show was canceled. Now he's back on. What the hell's going on here? Something happened between then and now because his audience is gone and his talent was never there. Why should they want someone back who does so poorly, who's not funny, and who puts the network in jeopardy by playing 99% positive Democrat garbage? Trump also claimed in his post that Kimmel was yet another arm of the DNC, and the best of my knowledge, that would be a major illegal campaign counter. Where the hell does he get this stuff? I swear to God. I don't know where he gets that. So, I spent 35 of my blessed years as a broadcast journalist and then as an independent contractor doing stories for CNN, CBS, and I worked at an ABC affiliate as a journalist as myself. So, we in journalism have what's called freedom of the press. Comedians have the same First Amendment rights as anybody else in being able to do satire and parody of public figures. Trump is a public figure. Whether you like him or don't like him, comedians do this. When Joe Biden was in office, comedians poked fun at him. You didn't hear Trump shoot his mouth off at that, did he? In fact, he went right along with it. Oh, that's funny. Now they poke fun at him. Oh, goddamn, you can't do that, you son of a... You know, it's crazy. You know, if it's about anybody else other than him, it's okay. But if it's about him, you can't do that. So, you know, Kimmel at times was choking back tears on his View return, and it was a rating smash. You know, for the show, he had huge ratings when he got back on there. Watch some of this.
I feel honored to be part of a group of people that knows what goes into doing a show like this. And I also want to thank all of you. Thanks to who supported our show, cared enough to do something about it, to make your voices heard so that mine can be heard. I will never forget it. And maybe, really, maybe most of all, I want to thank the people who don't support my show and what I believe, but support my right to share those beliefs anyway. People who I never would have imagined, like Ben Shapiro, Clay Travis, Candace Owens, Mitch McConnell, Rand Paul, even my old pal Ted Cruz, who, believe it or not, said something very beautiful on my behalf.
Tell you, if the government gets in the business of saying,
what you
we
can and
don't
can't
like
say,
what you, the media, have said, we're going to ban you from the airwaves if you don't say what we like. That will end up bad for conservatives.
I don't think I've ever said this before, but Ted Cruz is right. He's absolutely right. I've been hearing a lot about what I need to say and do tonight, and the truth is, I don't think what I have to say is going to make much of a difference. If you like me, you like me. If you don't, you don't. I have no illusions about changing anyone's mind. But I do want to make something clear because it's important to me as a human, and that is, you understand that it was never my intention to make light of the murder of a young man. I don't think there's anything funny about it. I posted a message on Instagram on the day he was killed, sending love to his family and asking for compassion, and I meant it, and I still do. Nor was it my intention to blame any specific group for the actions of what it was obviously a deeply disturbed individual. That was really the opposite of the point I was trying to make, but I understand that to some that felt either ill-timed or unclear, or maybe both. And for those who think I did point a finger, I get why you're upset. If the situation was reversed, there's a good chance I'd have felt the same way. I have many friends and family members on the other side who I love and remain close to, even though we don't agree on politics at all. I don't think the murderer who shot Charlie Kirk represents anyone. This was a sick person who believed violence was a solution, and it isn't. It ever. And also, selfishly, I am a person who gets a lot of threats. I get many ugly and scary threats against my life, my wife, my kids, my coworkers because of what I choose to say. And I know those threats don't come from the kind of people on the right who I know and love. So that's what I wanted to say on that subject. But I don't want to make this about me because, and I know this is what people say when they make things about them, but I really don't. This show is not important. What is important is that we get to live in a country that allows us to have a show like this.
So, as a little follow-up that just happened on this on breaking news, he went on his second broadcast. He also went on to poke a little fun at Donald Trump, and ABC's letting him do whatever he wants to do. Now, of course, here's some of the things why ABC, basically caved in a little bit. Their stock took a huge tumble. ABC, of course, is owned by the Disney Corporation. People were protesting the removal of Kimmel, and they were canceling their subscriptions to Disney Plus. They were canceling their subscriptions to other things that Disney owns, and the stocks were showing that they were tumbling. So I'm suppose that's probably had something to do when with people. We as the public, when we get together and do something as a huge group, people take notice and take action. And this was affected by ABC. Now, Sinclair Broadcasting just a couple of days ago announced that they were finally going to restore the Jimmy Kimmel Show as well. Nexstar hasn't done so yet. So they announced that they'll be airing Jimmy Kimmel after boycotting the show. Nexstar, which together with Sinclair originally boycotted the return of Jimmy Kimmel and said they weren't going to air it. Now, here's the situation. These group of ABC stations can piss and moan and groan all you want, but then they start getting in violation of carriage rules. I remember back when I was a young man, I worked for a station in Idaho Falls, Idaho, that was at the time owned by Bonneville Broadcasting Corporation, which is owned by the LDS Church. For basically that's what it was. And we refused to air Hill Street Blues, which at that time when it came on there was a very radical changing show. They had partial nudity in it. They had bad language. And of course, our station said, well, we're not going to air that. And that went on for a while until CBS said, you got carriage rules and you need to air this program. So we moved it and put it on like, I think 11:30 at night or something, and caved in and finally did it. But, these stations try to do this, but then they forget about, the contracts they have with the networks that, you've got to air some of this stuff or we will just pull you. You won't be airing any ABC programs. So, Kimmel went ahead and apologized, and he gave total respect to, to the family, and saying, it was a terrible thing that what happened. And, he went on to say how nice it was that, Kirk's wife said that she forgave the shooter. And, and getting back what's going on here with ABC, and Nexstar is currently trying to close a $6.2 billion deal to acquire its rival Tenega, which would require a green light from the Federal Communications Commission. So again, you've got the FCC trying to use leverage because, this guy now has Trump's walking orders to do whatever he says. Like, if you don't do this, then we're not going to give you the approval to do what you got to do. So that's really what's going on here is, playing ball with the FCC. The FCC never used to do this, but now it's become a political arm of Trump, and so he's trying to control the media. Like, if you want anything from the FCC, you're going to do what I tell you to do, and you're going to make me in a very positive light all the time, or I'm not going to let you have what you want as far as mergers of other corporations. That's not how things are supposed to work, but unfortunately, that's what you got going on here. Another news that's this past week, of course, in the spotlight is former Vice President Kamala Harris. She has returned again to the public eye, as you're well aware of. She's kicked off a new phase of the 2028 presidential race in excerpts, I should say, published ahead of the release of her new book. Harris outlined her internal thinking and developments that vexed her 2024 presidential campaign. She also offered some blunt thoughts about a handful of other prominent Democrats, including up-and-comers who she considered to be her running mate, like former Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg and Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro. Now, Harris's book has opened up the first big moment of the confrontation between potential 2028 rivals. Democrats are eager to skip ahead to their return to attempt a political comeback in Washington after Harris's loss last year, even if it's still far from clear who wants to seek the nominations. And Harris has not even publicly announced that she's going to run again for the 2028 bid. But while potential candidates are traveling to different key states and building their profiles, Harris's memoir has been engaging with her and sometimes criticizing her judgment. So some of the Democrats are not too happy about her book, particularly early in a presidential campaign that could eventually see them squaring up against each other. Harris's first excerpt, released in The Atlantic earlier this month, centers on the then President Joe Biden's decisions to step aside the groundswell of pressure after his June debate performance, a topic that has sparked repeated thoughts among Democrats in the wake of November's disappointing showing at the ballot box. So we'll have to see. I have not read the book, obviously. I'm just going along with what I see in the news excerpts. Some Democrats, though, are extremely nervous about her book and what she has said in it. And again, we don't know if Harris is going to run in 2028 or not. She's still very, very popular among some of the younger voters, and her constituents want her to run again. She did not run for governor of the state of California or throw her hat in the ring there either. So, it's still open whether or not she's going to run or not. But we'll just have to wait and see what happens. In other news that has been going on, and this is, I'm sad to say, this is actually kind of funny. I don't know what else to say about this except it's kind of funny. So Donald Trump and his wife Melania were forced to walk up a broken escalator at the United Nations. The incident prompted an angry response from Trump during his address to the General Assembly. Trump complained that the escalator stopped midway, stating that Melania's good fitness prevented her from falling. He criticized the United Nations, citing the broken escalator and a bad teleprompter as his takeaways. Now, I want you to watch this clip about Trump. I'm not going to show the whole thing, but some highlights here about his ranting and raving, and then he gets in front of the United Nations and completely cuts every one of the people down in the United Nations as the United Nations in his thoughts process is worthless and doesn't even need to exist. Watch this.
Country has ever done anything close to that, and I did it in just 7 months. It's never happened before. There's never been anything like that. I'm very honored to have done it. It's too bad that I had to do these things instead of the United Nations doing them. And sadly, in all cases, the United Nations did not even try to help in any of them. I ended 7 wars, dealt with the leaders of each and every one of these countries, and never even received a phone call from the United Nations offering to help in finalizing the deal. All I got from the United Nations was an escalator that on the way up stopped right in the middle. If the First Lady wasn't in great shape, she would have fallen. But she's in great shape. We're both in good shape. We both stood. And then a teleprompter that didn't work. These are the 2 things I got from the United Nations, a bad escalator and a bad teleprompter. Thank you very much. What is the purpose of the United Nations? The UN has such tremendous potential. I've always said it. It has such tremendous, tremendous potential, but it's not even coming close to living up to that potential. The carbon footprint is a hoax made up by people with evil intentions, and they're heading down a path of total destruction. You know, the carbon footprint was a big, big thing a few years ago. I remember hearing about the carbon footprint. And then President Obama would get into Air Force One, a massive Boeing 747, and not a new one, an old one with old engines that spew everything into the atmosphere. He'd talk about the carbon footprint, we must do so. Then he'd get in and he'd fly from Washington to Hawaii to play a round of golf. And then he'd get back onto that big, beautiful plane and he'd fly back and he'd talk about, again, global warming and the carbon footprint. It's a con job.
So President Donald Trump rebuked world leaders for being overly concerned about the climate change during that same speech. He called global warming a con job, believe it or not. And he spoke for nearly an hour without the help of a teleprompter, and he argued renewable energy, such as wind and solar, are a scam, and that nations should instead buy more American oil and gas. Yeah, you need to come buy stuff from us. We're the ones that are important here. And he went on and on and on, just complaining, and but he devoted more than 10 minutes to issues related to climate change. That's the whole thing. His whole speech was about that, calling it a scam. And the world leaders. This is the other thing, too, is 90% of the people that were there couldn't even hear his speech because the audio was not working, and they only could hear what they could hear through the interpreters. So that's what was kind of funny about this whole thing is he just went on, he made a complete spectacle of himself, complaining about everything. And so because the escalator didn't work, it doesn't hurt you for you to walk up there a little ways and get maybe some exercise or something instead of complaining about it. That's just my take, I don't think it would hurt you that much. So anyway, some other news that's going on here Benjamin Netanyahu, he also gave a speech at the UN a couple days later, and this guy went ahead and found half of the people walking out on him. So that was kind of interesting that happened there. Yeah, so scores of delegates walked out on Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at his speech at the United Nations General Assembly as the war in Gaza intensifies. And I'm not kidding you. Looking at this video here, dozens upon dozens of delegates, as soon as he got to the stage, just literally walked out. And this video just kind of shows you how much of his popularity has diminished. So after the delegates did walk out, he went ahead and finished his speech, touting his country's operation against Iran and its proxies in the Middle East. And he wants to finish the job in eliminating Hamas in Gaza. He wore a QR code on his jacket linking to a website detaining the atrocities from the October 7th attack, speakers on the border. And he had speakers, that's right, he had speakers on the border, so his broadcast of what he was saying was going to the Palestinians. And he said he surrounded Gaza with a mass of loudspeakers to do that. He spoke directly to Hamas leaders in the speech, telling them to release the remaining hostages or face death. And the families of Israeli hostages had spoken out against the move to broadcast the speech to other world leaders. And then he slammed the international criticism of Israel's war in Gaza and accused world leaders of caving into biased media, radical Islamite constituencies, and other anti-Semitic mobs. Netanyahu also called other countries' recognition of Palestinian state insane. And reaction to the speech, the head of Israel's opposition criticized Netanyahu's speech, which featured a pop quiz and other visual aids that's filled with gimmicks. Hamas said the scores of delegates who walked out before the speech showcased Israel's isolation, and on and on and on it goes. So as this guy is slowly is fading. And the same example that I've used with the United States, you know, grounding up thousands upon thousands of so-called illegal immigrants, you cannot tell me that Israel had the capacity to centralize and go after Hamas and Hamas only in this so-called war. I mean, I can understand that. You know, if they had the hostages, just go after Hamas. You don't have to completely obliterate the entire state of Palestine. You don't have to kill thousands and thousands and thousands of women, children, and innocent men who don't even support Hamas to get to your goal. And this is why, you know, this guy is becoming so unpopular. And while some countries have brought him up on war crimes because he never stuck to the mission. He's power hungry now. He's just going after other countries now. And this is why a lot of people here in the United States are starting to, you know, lose support of this guy. War crimes is what they're calling it, and what he's done to the innocent people of Palestine. People, you know, call it casualties of war and other terminology. I don't care. You know, you cannot sit there and tell me, just like we know with the rounding up of these illegal immigrants, that each and every one of them are criminals. They're not. They're victims of this atrocities, and even our own people here in the, you know, both Democrats and Republicans are starting to come together and say enough is enough. And this guy has become insane, and you can't. I can understand their reasoning for what they're doing. So anyway, let's move on to something that's more of a light, and that is this statue. Now this is freaking funny. The National Park Service and the United States Park Police removed a statue that depicted President Trump cavorting with his former friend Jeffrey Epstein from the National Mall on this past Wednesday morning. The statue is the latest in a series of such displays placed on the mall by a group of anonymous artists receiving a permit. They actually had a legal permit to do this from the National Park Service that allowed it to stay up until 8 p.m. on September 28th. A spokesperson for the National Park Police and the Force assisted the National Park Service in removing the statue Wednesday at 5:30 a.m. due to it not being in compliance with the permit. While Trump ordered the removal of a long-standing piece of a demonstration near the White House lately, his administration, already under fire for its assaults on free speech, appeared to take something of a laissez-faire attitude about the statue, as they had with others that paid a, humorous salute to other things. And another one that implied that Donald Trump was a dictator, which was approved, and one that showed a video of Trump dancing awkwardly. White House spokesperson Abigail Jackson told the Washington Post that the organization that had installed them was wasting their money, but didn't say anything else about why they wanted that particular statue gone. So, again, free speech, freedom of expression, not another Trump administration. You have no right to make fun of our president. It has to be all positive or don't put it up. And just like my last episode I did of the Right Has Left podcast last week about all these banners now Trump's trying to put down, just like they do in North Korea, showing his face like we don't know who our president is. He wants these big banners with his face saying, oh, look at me, I'm your president, I am your king. So you better take notice and look at this stuff. Multiple recent news reports also have alleged that Tom Horman, we need to take a look at this guy too. So Tom Horman, you want to know who this guy is? He was a border czar. You remember this guy? Well, recent news reports allege that Tom Horman, the president administration's border czar, accepted $50,000 in cash from undercover FBI agents in 2024. The report sparked by a bribery investigation that was later closed by the present Justice Department. Oh, gee, no kidding. After Donald Trump took office. Allegations of a bribery scheme, the FBI sting in September 2024. Undercover FBI agents posed as business executives seeking to win government contracts in the border security industry. The payment during the meeting, Holman, who was a private citizen at the time, that you need to keep that in mind, accepting a bag containing $50,000 in cash. The investigation was initiated after the FBI received a tip suggesting Holman was soliciting kickbacks. Holman denied any wrongdoing, but watch this clip and listen carefully. And coming out on that, 3, 2, 1. So what went down was that he promised, according to reports, Holman indicated he could help the undercover agents secure contracts in a potential second Trump administration. And then this present administration closed that investigation when Trump assumed office. Now, there is also said there was lack of evidence cited by FBI Director Kash Patel and Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche. No, lack of evidence. And they say they found no credible evidence of any criminal wrongdoing. Oh, really? Political motivations were alleged, of course. Some sources familiar with the case said that the investigation was closed despite an initial plan by agents and prosecutors to wait and see if Holman would follow through with his promises after taking office. Of course, Caroline Leavitt, Trump's little, press secretary, she said, it's just a big scheme by the Biden administration to take down our people. She's wonderful. Trump needs to keep her around forever and ever because she will do anything Trump tells her to do. She'll say anything. She'll lie out of her teeth. She'll do whatever it takes. She's just amazing. A lot of people make fun of her, as justly so, because she never has any facts to back up what she says. She just says it, and she's a very good loyalist, I have to say that. Senate Democrats and others have urged Attorney General Pam Bondi and the FBI to release documents and video footage related to the closed investigation. They won't do it. Holman's response when questioned, he said, I've done nothing absolutely wrong, as I just said. So this goes on and on and on and on. I tell you what my question is, where is the $50,000? Where is it right now? Did Holman take it? If so, where is it? Follow the money trail. Absolutely nobody in all of these discussions have said one thing about where is the $50,000 now. That would right there prove, innocent or guilty to this guy. Nobody's just talking. I mean, if it was government money that was used for the sting, that's our tax dollars. Where's our $50,000, huh? Where'd it go? Nobody's saying about that. If that's what they use for the sting, that's our taxpayers' dollars. but nobody gives a crap, especially, I'm sure right now the Department of Justice is saying, piss off. We don't care where your $50,000 is right now. This case is closed. Sorry. So, anyway, that's what's going on there. In other news, the White House, of course, is raising the stakes of a potential government shutdown by drafting a request for federal agencies to prepare reduction in force plans in case Congress doesn't pass the spending bill before October 1st. In a memo from the Office of Management and Budget obtained by NBC News, the Trump administration indicated it's prepared to go beyond the traditional furloughing of some government employees during shutdown and fire federal employees. With respect to those federal programs whose funding would lapse and which are otherwise unfunded, such as programs no longer statutorily required to be carried out, the memo says that the notices will be given in addition to furlough notices provided due to lapse in appropriation. So, Trump says, yeah, I don't care. What has gone on here, just so you know, the Democrats have tried to meet with President Donald Trump. What the Democrats want out of all this is the restoring of the health care bill. They want to keep what was known as Obamacare to keep going. They want to keep Medicaid funded. And they want to make sure that people in the United States who have absolutely no other resources to get health care. That's not in the bill. Trump does not give a crap. You heard J.D. Vance said the only reason they want to keep that in place is to, make sure these illegal immigrants here in the United States have health care, which is total BS. And, these guys will say anything and everything to keep their base rallied up. And, of course, their base believes anything they say. So they don't realize that seniors like myself, who are now eligible for Medicare and Medicaid, need that funding. And that's what the Democrats want to put back in place. And the Republicans want nothing of it. They said that should be a discussion at a later time. But right now we need to refund, keep our funding together for the budget bill. We want to keep funding together to make sure ICE can still go out and run up all these illegal immigrants, as J.D. Vance has said. So, and Trump refused to meet with him. So he's all in favor of shutting down the government. He's like, I don't give a shit. Let's go ahead and do it. I've got my money. I've got my protection. I've got my meals coming every day. I don't care about anybody else. So the funding gap proposal is just this. The Democrats, as I said, want Medicaid and the health care package is restored. And the Republicans are saying, go to hell. I don't want to do that. So there you go. We'll have to see what happens with all of that. But I don't expect any miracles soon. I'll be surprised if they get in kind of either the Democrats are going to cave in or the Republicans are going to cave in. And if the other one does it, be prepared on October 1st to see the federal government literally shut down by about 80%. Anyway, in other news, we have not talked about this very much, and neither is the media. But I want you to take a look at this young lady. Her name is Madison Sheehan. Now, she used to be a Louisiana state wildlife and fisheries official, and she worked under Governor Landry of Louisiana. And he was very prominent in the crackdown on illegal immigrants and giving an area to put these detainees in. Well, that young lady that you just saw there, she is now the Deputy Director for U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Other words, is ICE. She is now the number 2 lady of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. And there's been some inquiries about her so-called qualifications, and nobody has commented. She's just 28 years old, and there's nothing wrong with her age, to be honest with you. Most people, though, are questioning her qualification. So she was appointed Secretary of the Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries. I can't say that word, Louisiana, by Landry in 2023, though she had no background in conservation or ecology. So she was, even when she got that job, she had no background in it. She previously worked on Kristi Noem's campaign for South Dakota governor and was executive director of the Republican Party there, where she worked on banning trans athletes from college sports. Otherwise, her qualifications are questionable. Besides issuing rules for softfish harvesting and letting military veterans hunt bears, Sheehan's most relevant experience over the last year seems to be lending her officers and to Landry to round up homeless residents. So there you go. As we all know with this present administration, you don't need any qualifications as long as you were loyal to the Trump administration or to his current, people that work there, like your South Dakota lady there who's now in charge of Homeland Security. You're going to get a job. We don't care if you're not qualified. And this particular position, Congress now doesn't have to approve a lot of this stuff. They've done this new blanket thing to where people in lower positions can just blankly be approved. It's because Republicans passed it, and you got a job. So, this is crazy. Some of these people are in these very prominent and in extremely important positions in our government. They have zilch experience, and they're now carrying out these things. Like Kash Patel, this guy has put out, information on things that should be withheld as you're working on cases, and he says he believes in transparency. Again, good defense attorneys, just like what's going on with Comey. These people shoot their mouth off and say things, and you can use that in court. And it just baffles me to the no end about how these people get these jobs. I mean, I know how they get them. I mean, they're loyal to Trump or loyal to his cabinet, and they have a position opening up, and they get on the phone and say, "Hey, I got a job for you. You want it? Oh, cool, yeah." And off they go. So, and they make over $100,000 a year plus, and for doing absolutely nothing. So, there you go. Let's take a look at Florida news. So Florida's housing market has fully shifted thanks to overdevelopment here in the great Sunshine State. It's Saturday morning. Thanks to overdevelopment, rising insurance and homeowners association fees, and economic uncertainty under President Donald Trump, homes are no longer selling in the state. We now have more inventory than we got people buying them. Miami, Orlando, Jacksonville, and Tampa are all officially buyers markets right now. A buyer's market occurs when there are more homes for sale than buyers. This gives some buyers a leverage. They can negotiate lower prices, ask for concessions, and take their time finding the right property. The prime just came down a little bit here. We still have extreme inflation, but I understand what they're saying. I mean, where I live here off of the East Coast in Florida, there is a lot of homes going up and nobody's buying them. So these homeowners are starting to lower the prices to get property to move. So kind of interesting. My last little bit of news story here. Let's take a look at this guy, David Jolly. If you're wondering who this guy is, he's thrown his hat in the ring to run for the governorship. Jolly is no stranger to politics. He's the former Tampa Bay area congressman who left the Republican Party 7 years ago. He's now running for governor as a Democrat. And he says we have an affordability crisis in the state that has people from all walks of life questioning whether or not they can continue to live in Florida. He's a 52-year-old attorney. And he's the father of 2 kids, ages 6 and 4. I think affordability crisis is hitting everyone from every walk of life, and I think there's a strong case to be made that Republicans have largely created this environment. He's the first Democrat of note to launch a campaign ahead of the November 2026 election, despite joining the party only 6 weeks ago. For the Republicans, U.S. Representative Brian Donalds is running with President Donald Trump's endorsement, and Florida's First Lady Casey DeSantis is also considering her own campaign to succeed her long-term husband, although I don't think she stands a chance in hell of making it because nobody likes DeSantis right now. Jolly, who left Congress in 2017 and registered without party affiliation a year later, has been on something of a charm offense as of late. He has been traveling the state and meeting with voters and churches to raise his profile and listen to the frustrations with Florida's Republican-dominated government. Good luck to him. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think any Democrat running for the governorship in this state stands a chance in hell. It's just the way it is. This state has turned almost completely red, and most voters in this state don't have any critical thinking skills. I hate to say that, but, and I mean that with all love, because once you register as Republican, you just go down the line and vote for Republicans. And people who run for these offices as a Republican know this. They don't need any critical thinking skills. I mean, I could probably register as a Republican and run for something, and they would vote for me. They don't even have any critical thinking skills, and as far as you're a Republican, so I'm going to vote for you. And that's the way it goes in this state. I mean, God bless this guy for running, but people here don't think that way. They say, I'm a Republican, and therefore I'm going to vote Republican. I don't care who's on the ballot. I go on the ballot, and I have never done that. Even when I was a Republican, before I became a Democrat, just like this guy, I still use my critical thinking skills. I would still look at the candidate. I would investigate them. I would look at their profile. I would look at where their platform is, and I would look at where they stand. And if I didn't agree with that, Republican or not, I did not vote for them. There has been many times where I cross-voted, even as a Republican, because that's just what I did. I took the time to look at the candidate. And that's what you're supposed to do. Just because you register as a Republican or Democrat does not necessarily mean you have to vote that way. It does not mean you have to. Use your freaking head and look at things. People don't do that anymore. And this is why the Republicans have gotten a lot of control, is because they've gotten a lot of people behind them that, for lack of whatever reason, they just vote party lines. They don't, just like we got right now with most of our Senate and congressmen and congresswomen in the offices right now. They don't care about the constituents. They don't care about the people who put them in office. They're just voting the way Donald Trump tells them to vote, or else. They're more scared of retribution, there we go, we got that word out, than voting for, hearing what their constituents say. And it's going to show up in the midterms. It really will. People are angry, and it's going to cost some of them. It really will. And they don't know that right now. So they think loyalty to the guy in the White House is more important than there's people that put them in office. Okay, that's all I got on this episode of The Right Has Left. I'm Roy Garton, your host. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. I look forward to your comments. Until next week, you try to have a good week. Until then, take care.